The Boston Tea Party is often cited as the seminal moment of American protest of British rule. But just a couple of years earlier, there was another protest, one that lives on through an iconic flag. You may have seen the flag in the news, as far-right groups in the United States were using it in the aftermath of the 2020 US election. But the Pine Tree Riot wasn't about elections at all. It was about pine trees. You see, England's famed navy was constantly engaged in warfare for the protection of merchant activity. These huge ships depended heavily on pine trees. Because the masts, along with the booms, of the ships were made of single giant pieces of wood, they were particularly in need of big pine trees. In the early 18th century, laws were passed in New Hampshire to protect these trees for the British Crown. The original diameter for these protected trees was 2 feet, but it was shrunk to 1 foot. So any trees with a diameter larger than 12 inches were unable to be harvested by the locals, which, by the way, doesn't really seem like a very big tree. Frankly, the law wasn't a problem until around 1770 because, well, the colonists were just ignoring it. Sawmill owners in 2 towns, Goffstown and Weir, were caught and charged a fine of 50 pounds per tree, which is approximately $13,000 per tree in today's money. They hired a lawyer to represent them who promptly met with the government, who in turn offered him a job. The lawyer accepted the job and then told his clients to pay their fines. Great work, bro. The Goffstown mill owners agreed to pay, but the owners from Weir, led by a man named Ebenezer Mudgett, refused. The sheriff for the area, along with his deputy, set out for the town to arrest old Ebenezer. They spent the night at the local inn, conveniently called the Pine Tree Tavern, which was probably a mistake. A group of townspeople decided to attack them, and in preparation, they collected tree branches and used soot to darken their faces as a disguise. I'm going to be careful drawing that. Also, I'm pretty sure they'd be able to figure out who did it anyway. Who was it? The guy who's a farmer or the guy who just cuts down trees all day? The townspeople burst into the sheriff's and the deputy's rooms and began to beat them with the tree branches. They carried them out of the rooms and out of the inn entirely. Their horses were also attacked. The townspeople not only shaved the manes and tails of the horses, but they cut off their ears. I mean, I think that's cruel, because the horses didn't care at all about the pine trees. The sheriff and his deputy were then forced to ride out of town on their wounded horses. This was the maximum extent of the riot. Soldiers were sent to arrest the men, who tried to hide in the forest. However, one man was caught and he snitched on his sheriff assaulting homies. 8 men were charged, though they were ultimately only fined 20 shillings each. This defiance against the British, lightly punished, had an impact. Just over a year later, tea was floating in the Boston harbor. The famous pine tree flag isn't actually the original. This one is the one that they would have flown during the riot and was a symbol of New England. The now iconic An Appeal to Heaven flag appeared a couple of years later, featuring during the Revolution. After all, the An Appeal to Heaven part references the philosopher John Locke's idea of the right of revolution against a monarchy. It became a symbol of anti-tyranny and was even the official flag of the Massachusetts Navy. Actually, it still is, but they got rid of the words in 1971. In conclusion, America is a country because of tea and because of pine trees. That doesn't need to be British.